Hello everybody, welcome once again to another installment of A Rebel Without Applause. This time coming not from my television studio apartment in my nutshell of infinite space in Hollywood, but from an undisclosed location in South Central Los Angeles. And I've often asked myself the question, what is heroism? Well, today, sitting right next to me, I am in the presence of a living and breathing example of heroism. I know the Army gives out congressional medals of honor for heroism in combat, but this is a combat of a different sort. It's my belief that this gentleman even represents a rare form of courage. It's the kind of courage that embraces the teachings of Jesus, the tactics of Gandhi, and the righteousness of Martin Luther King. By that I mean the soul force. By that I mean satyagraha or nonviolence. And this is the kind of courage that invented a decade and transformed a nation. And the gentleman beside me, Claude Liggins, is deserving of a place on the rarest of honor rolls. To the guards at Parchman Penitentiary in Mississippi, he was known as prisoner 21075. But to the world, he is a freedom rider. He was there in that fateful summer of 1961. I'm honored to have him with me right now. Thank you so much for inviting me to this sacred space to talk about those events. Claude Liggins, how are you?
Pretty good.
Yeah? Mm-hmm. How are you feeling today? Some 60 years after those events.
Yeah, I was just getting ready to say, I never dreamed back then I would be talking to anybody about it 60 years later. Especially since a lot of people have died.
Yeah.
And I would say within the next 5 years, maybe even 10 years, none of us will be around. So I've been fortunate enough to live this long.
Yeah.
I've been waiting for this interview.
Oh, really? For 60 years?
No, I'm just joking.
Nobody told me. I would have come earlier. Who knew? Claude was introduced to me by Janie Forsyth McKinney, formerly Janie Forsyth. She's in my previous podcast, and if you haven't heard that or watched it, she was a young 12-year-old who, when the buses, the freedom riding buses that were traveling across Alabama were overtaken by the Ku Klux Klan and firebombed, she, young white 12-year-old in front of her family store and home, came to the aid of really the first group of freedom riders that originated from Washington, D.C. Janie, who has been memorialized for her heroic efforts, kindly referred me to Claude with a phone number, and I believe she reached out to you to say, yeah, you can talk to this guy. So Thank you, Janie, for the referral, and thank you, Claude, for being here with me, allowing me, and also, more importantly, for what you did so many years ago. I want to start at the beginning for you. We're here in Los Angeles. Los Angeles has been your home, I guess, since you were a high school
since
kid.
I was 19.
You were 19, but it all started out for you in
Lake Charles, Louisiana. I always wanted to participate in something like the Freedom Ride. Now, being from a small town in Louisiana, you didn't see much and you didn't know much.
Yeah.
But I had a school teacher. She was very inspirational in talking about colored history. That's what they used to call it back then, you know. And as I went through elementary school and high school, I would learn bits and pieces of history because they didn't teach it. And I remember when I was in about the 9th grade, I read about the Boston Tea Party. That was one of the things I said, boy, I wonder what it would have been like to be in that. And so I always wanted to be part of it, even as a young person.
So you wanted to be part of history or something?
I didn't look at it like that. I just wanted to be part of making a change. I remember my grandmother used to work for this doctor, and one of the things that doctor's son had, he had these shelves, and it was just so full of toys. And I said to myself, wow, he sure got a lot of toys. And I had enough toys, you know. I mean, I didn't have that many, but I had some. But one day she took me downtown on Rhine Street with her to a doctor's appointment. I was only about 4 or 5 years old. And never will forget that day. Doctor's appointment was taking a little long. So I told my grandmother I was hungry. So she gave me what we used to call back in those days 2 bits. That's a quarter.
Yeah.
So she gave me a quarter to go down and get a candy bar. When I got downstairs, I decided I wanted to go and get a hamburger. So I walked into this white cafe, sit down at the counter, and the man asked me, said, "What can I help you?" I said, "Yeah, I want a hamburger." And he took my quarter and he started cooking the hamburger. That was my first sit-in I was thinking about later.
So you sat down, right?
Yeah. Anyway, another white man came in, and he asked the man that was cooking the hamburger, I think he was the owner of the place, what was I doing in there? And they said, "Oh, he's waiting for his hamburger." And the man that came in said, "Oh, he doesn't belong here." So the man that was cooking the hamburger said, "Well, you need to get up and stand up against the wall." So I stood up against the wall. I wanted to leave, but he had my quarter and I didn't have my hamburger, so I wouldn't.
You wanted to get the hamburger.
Yeah, or get my quarter back,
Yeah.
I didn't think of it like that, but I wanted the hamburger. So what happened is, I remember that day I was humiliated. I didn't know that big word back then.
Mm-hmm. But you felt...
I felt like something very unfair was happening to me.
Mm-hmm.
I never forgot that. I think of it as my first sit-in.
Right.
Even though I didn't know, exactly what I was doing.
Uh-huh.
I think that was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it set a fire in me that's never gone out. And I think about that even to this day, every day.
Were these kind of conversations going on in your household with your parents or brothers?
No, at 4 years old, they weren't talking to me about.
Right. But as you got older in Louisiana.
Yeah, my grandmother and my mother were very proud people, and they didn't like segregation that we encountered. My grandmother was very supportive, and my mother, she was supported also, and she didn't like white people.
I don't like that many of them myself, and I'm white. It's a very big problem.
So anyway, as I grew up, I saw different things, and I remember one day we were living in these sharpshooters. That's a house that you could shoot from the front door and go all the way to the back door.
Did they call those things shotgun shacks?
Yeah, but they call them shotgun. Yeah, they did. Yeah. So anyway, I remember they used to have a lot of soldiers come there on furlough. Mm-hmm. And one day they had this man that was running, and they had these guys in this Jeep, and they were cursing him out. Said, "If you don't stop, we're gonna shoot your black ass."
White soldiers or on leave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they were MPs.
Okay. Yeah.
So what happened is, my mother, I was outside playing, and she said, come on in here. But I wanted to see. I went further out.
Yeah.
To see what was going on.
Uh-huh.
And that was another incident that happened to me early, and and I wanted to help the guy. I don't know what I was going to do.
Right.
But I wanted to help him.
Were you aware of the NAACP, the SCLC, or CORE, any of these organizations?
No, I was not.
Had your family been in Louisiana for many generations?
Yeah, since about 1870.
Oh, okay. So you still have family there, I imagine?
Mm-hmm.
Why and how did your family decide, let's go to L.A.?
No, I came here alone.
You did?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so your parents stayed?
Mm-hmm.
And what made you make that choice?
Well, there were 2 reasons. I wanted to finish my last year of high school, and I didn't think I was going to finish it there because they had French that was required, and I couldn't get it.
couldn't grapple with it.
No.
So were those schools in Louisiana, were they segregated? Or
yes.
So they were very segregated, even though this would have been after Brown v. Board of Education, I guess, 1954. These things were still pretty much locked down and segregated. Mm-hmm. So how did your family feel about you just deciding, well, I'm going to finish high school, I'm going to LA because I don't like French?
Well, it wasn't because I didn't like it. I couldn't get it.
Couldn't get it, right. Spanish is easier. I'm going to go to LA where Spanish is required.
Yeah. I don't think they ever knew the reason why I came. I wanted to get into show business.
Oh, okay. Well, hey, you're in show business right now. It finally happened.
Yeah.
So did you have an idea that you wanted to be an actor or?
Actually, I wanted to be a dancer. I wanted to be another Freddie Stagg.
Oh, okay. All right.
I was the drum major of my school.
Uh-huh.
And I used to do dance routines on the field.
Oh, cool.
And
this is where it was happening. So let me ask you this. Did you have relatives or uncles or anybody? You just showed up in LA as a 19 or 18-year-old?
Yeah, my mother had a school friend that lived out here. Mm-hmm. There were a lot of people from my hometown, by the way.
Here?
But I didn't know that.
Uh-huh.
And I used to shine shoes. And I saved enough money to get my ticket. And I had about $116 left. I don't know what I was going to do with that. Coming this big sale. But fortunately, I got here on a Sunday, and there was a man about my age, was at the airport with his uncle and aunt, sending his sister back to Lake Charles. And so he came up to me, he saw me, he said, "Don't I know you?" And I said, we didn't know each other personally, but we knew each other from sight.
So you flew in, you didn't take the bus?
No, we were on the train.
Oh, you were on the train, sort of central.
Yeah. The only time I ever saw a plane was in the sky.
Yeah, okay.
He asked me, he said, "Where are you going to be living?" I said, "I don't know." And I said, "I have an uncle here." And he said, "You know where he lives?" I said, "No." He said, "Well, let me go ask my uncle if he knows him." And so he went and asked his uncle, and they were good friends when they lived in Lake Charles.
So you tapped into the Lake Charles sort of network.
Right away.
No problem. Somebody's looking after you.
So there were a number of people from Lake Charles that lived here, helped me along. They all knew my mother. They all knew my father. Because Lake Charles was a small place, segregated made it even smaller.
Right.
They were all friends. They went to school together, played together. I was very fortunate. I've seen this guy a number of times when I went to Lake Charles, and I go back, and when I see him, I tell him, I said, I will never forget what you did for me. And he doesn't even remember.
He doesn't remember? No.
And I told him, I told him what happened, and he's sitting there. And he says, "I don't remember." I said, "You may not remember, but I will never forget."
Yeah. Well, sometimes those events are relative. What is inconsequential to one might be life-changing for another, and it certainly was for you. So, did you live with him, or did you?
No, they found my uncle within a couple hours. They took me to his uncle's house, and they found my uncle. They took me over to where he was living. He was a porter on a train, so he wasn't even in town. And so his friends took me in. And I stayed there for about a week. My mother knew some people, and there was a guy, his name was Archie Hamilton, that told my mother if she ever needed any help, to let him know. So I had his number.
So people looked after you a little bit.
Yeah, and I stayed with he and his wife for about 6 months.
And you finished high school?
Yeah, I stayed with them, and I enrolled in high school. They didn't live too far from the high school.
And the high school was Fremont High School, which has many distinguished alumni to this day. Some great baseball players like Eric Davis and Willie Crawford, who played for the Dodgers, politicians like Kenneth Hahn, rappers like Dr. Dre, and a congressman named Henry Waxman, who was prominent, all from Fremont High, but no one more esteemed in my view than Claude Liggins now. Let me ask you this. So you're coming from New Orleans, or from
Lake
Charles, Louisiana, in the South, heart of the Confederacy, and here you are on the West Coast. In terms of the racial dynamics, did it seem freer, better? How was it different for you?
Well, the city was bigger.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't quite like Lake Charles, but it was segregated, really.
Yes.
Blacks live in their neighborhood, and whites live in their neighborhood. Fremont used to be an all-white school.
Yeah.
And I remember talking with somebody that was from Opelousas, Louisiana, and he was here, and we were talking about racial things. And he said, "Oh, we don't have any segregation here." I said, "That's because you don't ever go anywhere."
Right.
You know?
Right. I've made a big study. I've written a screenplay about the Freedom Riders, but I also wrote a screenplay about Central Avenue, which was very often was known as the main stem. It was a generation of jazz giants came right from that avenue.
Yeah.
A lot of the kids from Jefferson High, including Dexter Gordon, Buddy Collette, Art Farmer, they were all congregated in this avenue, and it was like a complete renaissance for music and culture, all out of the black community. Did you have a chance to experience it?
No, all that had stopped by then.
By the mid-50s, is pretty much over.
Yeah. They did have a lot of jazz clubs here and there around the city, but right down on 54th and Broadway, they used to have the 5-4 ballroom, and a lot of musicians used to play there. Every year, except for last year, and I don't know about this year, they have a Central Avenue Jazz Festival.
Right in front of the Dunbar.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to play in it.
So I didn't really get a chance. Even in Lake Charles, they used to have these groups used to come there.
Right.
But I was too young to go.
But you wanted to be in show business, so you
Yeah.
had an idea that you were going to be a dancer. And did you have a chance to pursue that or find it?
No, I enrolled in this dance school.
Yeah.
Took a couple lessons, and the Freedom Riders came. And
Okay.
I decided, well, I want to be a dancer. I said, but it's more important to be a Freedom Rider.
So you'd had these early experiences dealing with segregation and in the South in Louisiana. You move here, and then in the spring of 1960, we have these sit-in movements. The sit-ins at the lunch counters. You, of course, had preceded them in New Orleans with your and Lake Charles with your hamburger sit-in. The sit-in thing's starting to catch fire. First in Nashville. Did this get your attention?
Yes, and I wanted to participate, but I was new and I didn't know where to go.
So how did you find an organization?
I was coming from work. I heard where they had this group that left Washington, D.C. It was about 1 o'clock at night, and they left on a bus. And I said, I wish I had been on that bus.
You weren't aware of it until it left.
Right.
Right. And that was the Corps. James Farmer and Corps had organized this.
Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, it was about a week later. I'm not exactly sure of the time. But when the bus was bombed and burned in Anderson. Now, it's the strangest thing. Janie Forsythe was at this thing. Now, I had no idea.
How could you? Yeah.
And we met years later. And I remember saying, damn, I should have been on that bus. Now, who would have ever thought that I was going to meet people that was going to change society and inspire the world? And most definitely never thought I would meet Janie Forsythe because I didn't know anything about her.
Right. So you met her years later with reunions because that was the very first bus, or the one of two buses, the one of which stopped was firebombed outside of her family store.
Yeah.
You later connected with her through these reunions. But that event in May of 1961, Mother's Day, got national or international attention. It became the cover of newspapers, not just the black press, but finally the white press was paying attention in a way that they hadn't before. That got to your attention here in Los Angeles.
Right.
What did you do?
I said I wanted to join, but I didn't know where to go or who to contact. And so I was trying to find out where to go. I was going to City College at that time. Strange thing, when I did find out, the Corps office was just a few blocks from
City College?
City College, and you could see it from the campus.
Uh-huh.
But anyway, I wanted to join, but I didn't know where to go. But there was going to be a Martin Luther King rally.
In L.A.?
In L.A. I said, well, I'll just wait until that event happens, and maybe I'll meet somebody
Right.
that can tell me how I can join. But anyway, it wasn't supposed to start till about 4 o'clock.
The rally.
Yes. I got to the sports arena at 10 o'clock.
Okay.
I wanted to make sure that I got into the building.
Right.
Okay. And after everybody had spoke, Martin Luther King had spoke, and other speakers spoke, it was about 11 o'clock, and they asked for volunteers. And I said, this is it.
And the core people were...
They were there. Earl Walters was the core chairman at the time.
Of the national organization of
local.
Los Angeles chapter? Mm-hmm. Now, as a quick aside, was SNCC had any presence at LACC?
No.
Okay, so core was basically the only avenue.
Yeah, but they weren't around at LA City.
Right.
They would just happen to office just happened to be a few blocks.
Got it. So somebody asked for volunteers after this Martin Luther King rally at the sports arena, which at that time was brand new. It's since been torn down, but it was an important place. It's where Kennedy was actually nominated. And so you contact these people, or they contact you, or?
And they told me where their office was, and I said, I didn't spend all this time looking for them, and they were right around the corner.
Yeah.
So Earl Walters said, well, you're too young, you can't go. And I said, oh, I'm going. He said, no, you're too young. I said, well, I'm going. I said, even if I have to follow you guys, I said, I'm going. Now, that would have been kind of hard to do because we left L.A. on a plane.
Right. That's so funny because, when you think of the Freedom Riders, you think of people on buses and maybe trains, but not flying.
Right.
So who paid for your ticket? Or how did you get involved? They said they gave in.
Yeah. I had a little money saved, about $400 or $500. And I was going to buy my own ticket.
Yeah.
To go. And that was my first flight when I took the plane. We flew from here to New Orleans. And I think we were there for about at least a week.
This is all happening fast because the Aniston thing blows up. The SNCC kids sort of rescue the Freedom Rides, and the Freedom Rides are now continuing in that first group of Freedom Riders is finding their way into Mississippi. They're getting jailed. So this happens pretty fast at this point.
Yeah.
Did you receive any training?
We got our training in New Orleans.
So you had a little time there.
Yeah, at least my group got the training in New Orleans.
And the training was in the discipline of nonviolence.
Yes.
Very strict protocols about how to behave and how to react in the face of potential violence. And had you heard about Gandhi and the nonviolent method and any of these ideas?
No, I had never heard of him. Remember, I was 20, and that wasn't a lot of news articles or anything about all this.
Yeah.
All of this. It all happened all of a sudden. A lot of people heard the call, and they did it. Last year and then the year before, when they had all these big demonstrations, and they had all of these people, and they had cameras and phones and all of that. We didn't have all that. All we had was a mimeograph machine.
Right.
And so that's how we communicated. If we would have had some of those things that they had a few years ago, boy, we would have been a lot bigger than we were.
Facebook, yeah, it would have been totally different. So you arrive in New Orleans. Now, let me ask you this. Was there any restrictions when you flew in terms of segregation on the airplane?
No, I don't remember.
There wasn't anything. Because after all, the whole purpose of the Freedom Rides was to force the Kennedy administration to enforce laws that were already on the books that prohibited any kind of discrimination in intra-state travel, whether it be on a bus, train, or plane. But in the South, at that time, the local customs were still in effect, and the federal government was not enforcing what was already been affirmed by the Supreme Court. So you're basically, or the larger strategy of the Freedom Rides, was to compel the Kennedy administration and Robert Kennedy's Justice Department to enforce the laws, the federal laws that were on the books that prohibited segregation in buses, bus terminals, trains, and planes, especially across the South. That was the stated political goal of this whole endeavor, as I understand it. Was that clear to you at that time?
No.
It was not. So you're in New Orleans. What was it? Describe the training, the indoctrination into nonviolence, or whatever that was.
You know, we were seated like we were on a train or in a bus or something, and somebody would come along and push us and curse us out and tell us we, had no business being there.
So rehearsals.
Yes. It was scary.
So the rehearsals were scary.
Yes.
So fellow corps members would play the roles of racists and segregationists and confront you guys as almost like a dramatic rehearsal.
Yeah.
And that was scary.
Yes, it was.
And what did you feel when you got confronted or challenged or called, awful names and stuff like that? How did you?
You mean after we had our training?
Well, during the training, just as you were,
Oh, scared,
Yeah.
I remember reading something that Patrick Henry said, "Give me liberty or give me death."
Right.
And that's how I felt.
So you're totally willing to lay it all on the line.
Yes.
At that moment. Mm-hmm. And the truth is, being nonviolent doesn't necessarily protect you from violence. It just prohibits and circumscribes your reaction to violence. So this is, in my view, really the highest kind of discipline and heroism. And I'm just I'm in awe of it as I talk to you, because I feel like nonviolence is hard because violence is in us all.
Yeah.
And it takes a discipline to kind of manage and control it.
Yeah, but the one thing about the people that joined the Freedom Riders and the sit-ins, the goal of these sponsoring organizations, they made it a point to get it over to us that we were supposed to be nonviolent. I often say that none of us was really nonviolent, but that's what they wanted us to do, so that's what we did.
Right.
Because when somebody hits you, knock you in the head and whatever, you're going to try to defend yourself.
Right.
But we weren't supposed to do anything.
Just take it.
Yeah. So it was really scary.
Yeah. Now the group.
But I was determined to go. I didn't care what they did to me, anything like that.
You were just ready.
I was going.
Now the group that you were in this training that converged, was it just an LA group, or were they converged and you were trained for people from basically had converged in New Orleans from across the country?
No, my group was basically from LA. Mm-hmm. Okay. There are a few people on there.
Is this the group?
Yes. There were a few people on there I don't remember. I don't remember all of them, but I particularly remember her.
Okay.
Arthur Brooks, Louise, Marcy, which she's changed her name. I remember Wayne, and I remember him, I can't remember.
And they were all from LA. These people were the LA crew.
Yeah, and probably some others are from LA too, but I don't remember.
Here's the group, and let's see, here's Handsome Claude 21075 for all time, right here. And you'll see that there he is. This is the group that arrived, or departed rather, from New Orleans to Jackson, Mississippi by way of train after landing by airplane in New Orleans.
Right.
So what is New Orleans to Jackson? What is that? I don't know, 5, 6, 7 hour trip, maybe 4 hours? I don't even know.
It was a very short trip.
Very short trip.
Yeah. They had one lady in here, Mary Hamilton. She did something that was very extraordinary years later.
What was that?
She was working as a Corps field director in Alabama, and she was arrested. And she was in court, and the judge called her name out, Mary Hamilton. And she said, "I refuse to speak unless you say Miss Mary Hamilton." And he called her name out again a couple of other times, and she said, "I won't speak unless you call me Miss Mary Hamilton." Mm-hmm. And when you go to court today, the guys or the women who were even in there for murder, they always addressed him as Mr. And it's because of her.
That's the respect that she earned as a defendant.
Yeah, she was put in jail, and had a $50 fine, and she refused to pay it.
Where do these people come from? Where do people like you come from? You know, they're just called to their conscience. Now, this group that I'm looking at looks very mixed. I see white people and...
Yeah, it was about, the Freedom Rider was almost 50-50.
And had you had much experience with sympathetic white people in your life prior to that?
No, not really, but even in growing up in Lake Charles, I did meet some people who were not prejudiced, you know. And later on, I met, this was after the Freedom Ride, we were told not to try to integrate anything by ourselves, but me, I didn't pay any attention to that.
Because you had the first hamburger, and so you integrated the hamburger stand in Lake Charles, so forget about it.
Yeah. So anyway, I was coming back to LA, and I went into the Greyhound bus station. By that, they hadn't really integrated anything yet, you know. And I sat down, and they had two white people in there. I think it was the father and his daughter. And he came over and told me, you have to move. I said, well, I'm not moving. A policeman happened to be coming through. And he told the police to go make me move. And the police came over.
LAPD?
No, this was in Lake Charles.
Oh, Lake Charles, okay.
Yeah. He came over and told me I had to move. I said, I'm not moving. And the supervisor passed by, and he told the supervisor, and he didn't say anything. Or do anything. The policeman got on the phone, and I guess he was talking to his superiors, and he was on the phone a long time. And when you're in these situations, boy, it seems like you're there forever, you know.
Yeah.
And he finished the phone call and just walked out and left me sitting there. But in the meantime, they had this young white girl. I would say we were about the same age. She came and she sat right next to me. And I said, oh, shit, you know. And they came and told her to move, and she just took her head and flung it back and said, I'm not moving. And here was somebody that didn't know me, but had that in their heart. She was a Janie Forsythe.
Right.
Okay? And the one thing I really regret, I didn't ask her for her number or her name or anything. I was scared to death, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But anyway, she stayed there till I left. And so I thought about it. I said, she was with me.
Yeah.
You know? Because she could have sat any place in the building, because there was only two people in the waiting room besides me. And but she didn't. She sat right next to me. And that was to support me. You know, years later, I was at a barber shop in Lake Charles, and there was a guy came in, and he saw me. We had gone to school together, but I never knew his name. And he told everybody, he said, Claude Liggins. And they said, Claude Liggins integrated the Greyhound bus station.
So you had a history going back.
Yeah. So anyway, I didn't think anybody had seen me except those few white people. But you know, you never know who's looking at you.
Right. Yeah, these acts, when it's just so impressive. So you're on the train, chugging across Louisiana, your home state, into Mississippi, and you get to Jackson. What happens?
As soon as we got off the train, we were arrested. We didn't get a chance.
You didn't get a chance to tour Jackson.
Dude, we didn't get a chance to do anything.
You didn't get the key to the city.
No.
You didn't get the key to the...
No. And as the train was pulling into Jackson, they had all these policemen lined up along the railroad.
Uh-huh.
And I remember all of us were scared. I was so scared I didn't know if I was going to make it. You know, I had to pull myself.
Right.
You know.
So you get off the train rather, bam, you're arrested.
Right.
Let me ask you this. On the train from New Orleans to Mississippi, were those train cars segregated and you guys were challenging?
Yes, but we integrated them.
You integrate. So you were doing an active protest on those trains on your way to Mississippi.
Right.
Had you been in the back of the train car in the segregated, you would not have been arrested. But basically, you were defying the custom on the train, got off the train station, bingo, Hinds County, arrested.
Right. That train, Illinois Central, they had a name for that. Well, a lot of black people took that train to Chicago. Anyway, the train pulled into the station, and they said, y'all better move or you're going to be arrested. Well, naturally, we didn't come all that way to move. We sat down and we were arrested.
And you knew that was the protocol. It had happened to others before. You're going there, you're going to stress the system, you're going to force these sheriffs and to fill these jails with protests. That's the Gandhian idea. So now you're processed, and that's when you get your portrait right here, I assume?
Yeah.
You're in a suit and tie, looking very dapper and handsome. I have a picture of it here.
They took us to jail. I don't know whether it was the city or the county jail, but they took us to jail for mugshots. Oh, that jail was nasty and dirty.
This is in Hinds County, or Jackson.
Yeah. Can't tell you much about the girls because we were separated.
Right.
But something happened in the jail with me. For some reason or another, they had me downstairs or in the jail, in a room. I was all by myself, except for the deputies, and they were asking me different questions. And that was a deputy that came in. He asked the other deputy, says, "What is he doing here? He doesn't look like he would do anything."
You?
Me, yeah. He says, and I was getting ready to give him my speech, and then another deputy said, "Oh, he's one of those old freedom riders." And then he said, "Shut up, don't say nothing." You know.
They process you. You're charged, obviously.
I am charged with breach of peace.
Breach of peace.
Yeah.
Which is a very broad and meaningless charge, basically.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Did you have a trial, or did they just ship?
Oh yeah, we had a trial that lasted 15 minutes.
In Mississippi immediately?
I think it was a couple of days.
And then they shipped you to Parchman.
Yeah, because we had filled all of the city jails or the county. I keep saying city or county because I can't remember which one it was.
Right, it's Hinds County, Mississippi, whatever. And
yeah.
So you were tried in a show trial, basically, with many others, and shipped out to Parchman to serve a term.
I think we stayed another couple of days
Yeah.
In the jail, and then we were transferred to Parchman. Yeah. You see, they had different groups. A group may have come up from Nashville, and then maybe the next day a group from Alabama,
right,
or what have you. I suppose they went through the same thing.
So the whole strategy, as organized by the SNCC kids at that time and CORE, was for like-minded, conscientious, black and white young people to be coming to Mississippi to challenge these laws, to flood the system. This is real life, folks. People call and interrupt and knock on doors. It's but part of what makes this fun. This is real life. This is not NBC or MSNBC or CNN. This is a Rebel Without Applause. Anyway, so people are coming from all over the country, Los Angeles in the case of Claude and his contingent, but from everywhere. So you're shipped out.
Yes.
Separated from the women, or were you guys all still together?
Yeah, we were separated from the
Were
women.
the blacks and whites freedom riders separated?
I think by that time they had separated us.
How'd you get to Parchman?
We were in a paddy wagon. It seemed like it took forever to get there. And we were in this section. They weren't using that particular facility at the time.
A section of Parchman.
Parchman, yes.
Right. And for those of folks that don't know about Parchman Penitentiary, it's in the Mississippi Delta, and it was famous. It was a work farm. It might as well have been a slave plantation living in 1960. It was where people went, and some of whom never really ever came out of. Had you been aware of the reputation of Parchman?
No.
You were not?
I had never heard of it.
Yeah.
So anyway, we were taken to this, they weren't using it for the general prison population. They had told us that they were going to put us in the general population of prison. But they changed their mind because they said we would probably incite the prisoners.
They didn't want them indoctrinated.
Right. Everybody in that building were freedom riders.
Right.
Yeah. I got a chance to meet people like Stokely Carmichael, Hank Thomas.
John Lewis?
No, he was before me.
He was in the original group, basically.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
What about James Lawson? Had they already been let out, or was he still there?
No. As I said, we came in different groups.
Right.
Okay. You'll notice in the book they have different dates.
Right. You arrived in middle
Yes.
of June. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I think like Carol Ruth Silver, she was a couple of groups ahead of me.
In front of you.
Yeah.
Yeah. From the north. I think she was from Chicago or New York.
New York.
Yeah. So one of the most prominent people, he's very prominent in my screenplay as well as a young freedom rider, is Stokely Carmichael. Now, you mentioned over the phone that he was your cellmate. Was that
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
What was your impression of him when you met Stokely Carmichael?
Very bourgeois.
He was.
Yeah.
In what way?
He had this New York accent.
Right.
And the way the sales were made, we didn't see each other, but we would communicate.
So you weren't in the exact same square as him?
No. Oh, later on I was.
You were?
Yes.
Yeah.
Later on we were in the same cell together.
So he's this New York guy. I think went to Howard University at the
Yes.
time.
Mm-hmm.
Very different background probably from you.
You're right.
I mean, even though you're from LA, you really had very Southern roots.
Mm-hmm.
Different. Was he confrontational? Was he nice? What was his? What did you feel like I could be his friend, or what was your feeling?
No, I think we all felt like we could be friends. All of us were confrontation.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned earlier, Stokely, Carmichael, Hank Thomas, Jan Triggs, and myself, when they pulled us out of the cells because we were singing, they took us to this place where it was like a big dormitory, but it was empty. But they had cells in the back. And that's when we were traveling down the road and we saw the prisoners working on the roadside.
The chain gangs.
Yes. And surprised to see that they had the whites in prison uniform that had their shotguns and they were guarding us. I mean,
Trustees. They were also prisoners.
Yeah.
That's sort of the real everyday life of Parchman Prison. It's a work farm,
Mm-hmm.
growing cotton and fixing roads. And what kind of conversations happened when you were in these cell blocks? With all the other freedom riders. Anything that sticks in your memory or moments?
Yeah, we wanted to change everything. Everybody was willing to die, really, and they wanted to change the system. And of course, being by part of it, they did change the system. We had very intellectual, I would say, conversation between the two.
You and Stokely and others.
Yeah.
What was his point of view? Do you recall? I mean, he later became famous for,
Black power.
Black power, and maybe a more militant
Yeah.
or potentially violent posture than the nonviolent indoctrination of the early 60s. He goes on to become, almost an American symbol of a sort. He replaced John Lewis as the head of SNCC some years later. Mm-hmm. Did you get any inclination of that when you were...
No. Mm-mm. Actually, when we left prison, and we left just like we came in, some left, for example, on a Tuesday, and some left later on in the week. So we didn't really get a chance to communicate much except in the prison, because what happened is everybody went back
to their own world.
Yeah. They went to different groups. Like I stayed in Mississippi for a little while and worked there.
Really?
Yes.
Did you meet Medgar Evers?
Yes, I did.
Because he was head of NAACP in Jackson.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What was that like?
Well, when I first met him, I first saw him, I didn't know who he was.
Mm-hmm.
But then I would see him every day. And that's when I found out he was field representative of NAACP. And I had a chance to talk with him. And it's a strange world. His wife, this is after he had been assassinated, was running Myrtle Evers, I think her name was. She was running for some political office here in L.A.
Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
She moved here.
Yes.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
Yeah, and they introduced her, and then what I did, I went up to her and told her, I said, I've met your husband. And she was surprised because a lot of people had not ever heard of Medgar Evers.
Even after he was killed.
Yeah.
In 1963.
Right.
He's often left out of the major 1960s assassinations, of course, John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X.
Yeah.
And Medgar Evers. So he was murdered outside his home in 1963, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you met him. What was he like? Any recollection?
Not much. We didn't have any long conversations.
Yeah.
Just was introduced to him, and we talked. Remember, that was 60 years ago, so.
Here's a question I have. When you're in the jail in Parchment and you guys are talking and singing, and I read where there was protests about the mattresses and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah. They told us that if we didn't stop singing,
right,
they were going to take our mattress. So one day we were singing, and they told us we didn't stop. They were going to take our mattress. So we took our mattresses off the bed, put them on the floor, and told them to come get them.
So you kept singing?
You kept singing.
Do you remember any of the songs?
We Shall Overcome, and Which Side Are You On, Boy? Hallelujah, probably some others.
Yeah, a whole bunch.
Yeah.
And was James Bevel in the mix there? Do you recall him?
Yes, I remember him. I didn't meet him in jail, or in prison rather. But I met him when I was out and when I was working around.
In Mississippi?
Yeah.
It seemed like the strategy shifted from integrating transportation and lunch counters to voting rights very quickly. Was that the strategy at that point in Jackson?
No, that was not. That didn't come until years later.
A little later?
Yeah, and I was very active in that too. In fact, I was arrested here in LA, and I spent 6 months in jail here.
In LA? And that was for a voting rights issue here?
Yeah, sometimes I'm not sure whether it was for Voting Rights or the Civil Rights Act.
Right.
But one of those, I think it was the Voters' Rights Act. They had a real big demonstration downtown at the Federal Building. And I went down to the demonstration, but I went late because I had 2 more charges from other demonstrations that I was in. And I said, oh, God, you don't want to be put in jail.
Again, yeah.
But I heard about it on the radio and what have you, and I said, oh, I can't. I have to go down. I went down, and would you believe I was the first one to be arrested?
LAPD, right?
Yeah.
Now, here's a question.
No, that was the U.S. Marshal.
Oh, because you're on federal property. So when you finish this whole Freedom Rider experience and you go through this Parchment and you come out alive, were you feeling optimistic? Like this was a battle that we won and this is a strategy that can work going forward? What was your feeling about it afterwards?
I remember talking to a lady. She was my girlfriend at the time. I said, it seemed like there's just so much hope. And then I remember telling her, I said, but that seemed to be fading. She says, oh, no, she didn't think so. I explained why. I said, because people are not speaking up like they used to. The Freedom Riders and like the people that worked on the Freedom Summer.
1964.
Yeah. In actuality, the Civil Rights Movement was really a small movement. It may seem like it was big and you had a lot of people, but you didn't. I was very active. I was working as fundraising chairman.
Of CORE? Mm-hmm. So you stayed within that organization?
Yes. And I used to give different functions to raise money. And I was the treasurer to bail people out of jail. So that was my duty. So they had a lot of demonstrations, but I wasn't able to participate on a lot of them because I was trying to raise money.
They needed you in the office raising the money to get them out, right?
Yeah. And to get myself out too once
in a while. Yeah. So you come back to LA and there's Freedom Summer 1964 and then of course 1965, which for people with some knowledge of LA history, this neighborhood that I'm in erupts into rebellion. There's a lot of pressure and brutality historically from the police, and finally people basically have had enough, and it's essentially not a nonviolent reaction. Where were you and what was your feeling about that period of time?
Well, I remember exactly where I was when it happened. It was pretty scary. We weren't supposed to be on the street, but I did manage to get back to the CORE office. Mm-hmm. And of course, a lot of buildings were burned, and I wouldn't have participated in anything like that. And my thoughts were on that. You can burn the building down, but it has to be built.
He's got to build it back.
Yeah. But I understand. People do that when they didn't have any other they didn't feel within themselves that they had any other recourse.
Right.
I met the number of people that was arrested. So it was pretty depressing to see that, because a lot of people were arrested and went to jail.
Lots.
Yeah. And wasn't too much that we could do about it. And they're still trying to build back some of the buildings that was burned.
In 65, not 92, we're talking 65.
Yeah.
And what kind of emotional effect did that have on you? You had had this nonviolent experience as a young guy with the freedom rides, and then all of a sudden, not only LA, but so many cities are burning, and then we're tumbling into a war in Vietnam. And I mean, my own recollection, I was just a little boy, but I did have a feeling like growing up in the valley, like, what's going on? Like, what is this? Why are people so angry? People just don't spontaneously combust. They just don't get angry because it's hot. There's other things. And I mean, I didn't know. I grew up, just my own experience, in the lily white San Fernando Valley. I went to Taft High School, and it was very segregated. I mean, maybe there wasn't color lines, but it was totally segregated. And
that's because of where people lived.
Yeah. But there was restrictive covenants too that prohibited people to move, or to buy, or to sell.
Yeah.
But I just remember as a little person, 1965, like thinking, why? That's all. I didn't understand. I feel like I have a better idea now.
Well, if you look back in history, with every movement there was violence. When the women were marching for voters' rights, women chained themselves to the gates,
right,
to the fence. Some of them were jailed. Some of them were beaten. When you had the unions,
brutality.
People don't realize that all these things happen. Nothing came because they woke up, powers to be woke up and said, "Oh, we're gonna change this, we're gonna change that." They changed because they were forced to change.
People like you forced it.
Yeah. If people really would look back at history and read, they will see that nothing came because they decided to let us do it. You look at the
George Floyd last year.
Yeah. Once he got killed, and he had all these thousands of people all over the world, they demonstrated. Boy, that was very encouraging.
Yeah, I was here. I was in it, right down Hollywood Boulevard, right where I live.
Yeah. I was in a few, but unfortunately, when I went down to march with the group, I found out that I wasn't 20 years old anymore.
Oh, your marching skills weren't quite what they used to be.
Right.
Well, those people that marched, were sitting on your shoulders. So much of what happened in those freedom rides and the sit-in movements in the early years of the 1960s set the table for whatever social progress we have today. I mean, you're a largely unrecognized hero, but it doesn't diminish, in my view, what you were part of, and it must make you feel good to be part of it.
Oh, it does, yeah. It makes me feel real good, But getting back to the marches, I found myself sitting on the bus bench marching from MacArthur Park to City Hall.
Okay.
I said, "Claude, you just can't do it like you used to." So I had to rest a lot.
All right.
That when I was younger.
You'd have been leading it.
Right. I remember we walked all the way from Will Rogers Park on 103rd Street all the way to City Hall.
Okay. See, I'm white. I think of Will Rogers off of Sunset Boulevard in the hills with the horses, but Will Rogers down here.
Yeah.
Right. Did you get to know James Lawson at all?
Oh, yeah. We've been on a number of speaking engagements in the same place.
Yeah.
We've never really been close friends. In fact, there were people who mistaken me for
James Lawson?
Yeah,
well,
because of my hair.
I can see a little resemblance with the hair.
Yeah.
Now, James Lawson was really mentored the first sit-in movements. He had returned from India and was very well indoctrinated into the disciplines of Mahatma Gandhi and put those tools to the test, first in Nashville and then later as part of the Freedom Rides. And then he relocated eventually from Memphis to Los Angeles in the Holman Methodist. So you weren't a member of the Holman Methodist?
No. No.
And he was on the first bus, I believe, into Parchment, Mississippi.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But we've met a number of times.
Is there anything about this whole Freedom Ride experience that's really not been discussed or understood or articulated that you would just like to share for the record?
I think that we could be used as an example of what could be done. We didn't have all of the technology that they have now, but we used what we had available. Mm-hmm. And it was new in a sense.
Well, the television networks were on this in a way that they'd never been before at that time.
Right. But I'm glad that I was a part of it. I always jokingly said the movement could not have gone on without me.
Well, you know, my mission, and as part of this podcast and just my writing career, is to kind of share the truth of our history. Because I don't think if people get the truth, they can really recognize the need for change. Mm-hmm. And these stories, specifically this story, which, you know, you guys totally lit the candle, in my view, for the decade and the idealism that flowed out of it and the social progress that so many people enjoy.
The one thing about the being active in the civil rights movement, gee, I have met some hell of a people.
Yeah?
People I would have never known.
Yeah.
Janie Forsythe. Now, who would have ever thought that I was going to be friends with some little girl that nobody had ever heard of?
Yeah.
From Anderson. And I feel so good about that.
Yeah.
That I know these people.
Yeah.
They have things on television and maybe historical things on television, people who are still active. And I can say, you know, I know them, I met them.
You're part of it.
Yeah.
You're on one of the most distinguished honor rolls of the American 20th century.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter how much money you make or don't make, you don't get on that honor roll. You can't buy your way into it.
Right.
And you're on it. And I'm humbled to be in your presence, honestly. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel good about what I've done, except I wish I could have done more.
Yeah, well, it's not over. You're still here. Maybe people will watch this and get inspired. Mm-hmm. And you pursued a career. You had a printing business, or?
Yeah, I was in graphic arts.
Okay.
And I used to manufacture black greeting cards. And
when you say black greeting cards,
for instead of white faces, it had black faces.
Black people in the greeting cards.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know.
Right.
Yeah.
My cards were sold all over the country. Never made any money on it though.
Well, Claude Liggins, I wanted to thank you for this conversation.
Yeah, I'm honored.
Can I show people the little trophy there?
Oh yeah.
It says Claude Liggins, Freedom Rider, presented by the Mississippi Freedom 50th Foundation, Inc., May 24th. So that was just about 10 years ago in Jackson, Mississippi. Is there something else? Oh, wait, we got to see. I want to see the Freedom Rider trophy case. He got his ass kicked in Parchment. He went in the hole, but he later got some rewards for it. Okay, so this, I'm going to read it. It says Claude Albert Liggins, Freedom Rider, 2011 African American Heritage Month Spirit of Los Angeles Award. Claude, I just want to thank you for this.
Yeah,
and I feel like I hope you have not necessarily unburdened yourself, but shared everything you wanted to share about these events.
To participate and to have met the people that I met that did so many great things. I can't believe it.
Yeah.
You know, that I was a part of it.
Well, you were more than a part of it. You were, you know, you were the point of the spear that transformed America and the world. So, hey man, I want to thank you again for this conversation and for what you did.
Thank you.
So
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Folks, thanks for hanging with me on A Rebel Without Applause. This is Claude Liggins. I'm Bill Kalmanson. Till next time, namaste, shalom, and aloha. By that I mean nama shalom. See you.